Hello and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 32. Pack light, travel far, midlife solo travel unpacked.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Hello. Well, it is a cold one out there today. Still, primarily blue sky. I don't mean to brag. A few gray clouds out there. And look, you know what? We're in a drought. We desperately need some rain. So I will be happy. I never thought I'd say that, but happy to get some rain. I think some of our farmers are really, really needing it. So that would be good. Not much I can do about the weather, but when the blue sky is blue, I will enjoy it. But yes, I will hope for some rain for those who need it. It has been an interesting week and a half. Oh my gosh, it's like a whirlwind. So for those of you who haven't kept up to date with all the Opt to Thrive things going on, last Saturday I did my very first ever webinar and it went really well. Was really happy with the turnout. I think it was 75% of the people who registered actually rocked up, which was amazing. I think if you look at the stats of these things, I'm, getting into all these stats, what means what, is this going okay? Am I going in the right direction? Is what I'm doing working? And apparently 30% is meant to be a good turnout. So I did good. Yay. Good job, girls, for turning out and supporting me and hopefully learning a bit. And then that day I debuted, depending on where you come from. I debuted my new coaching program. So the Opt to Thrive coaching program, calling it the Midlife Reset. So it's a brand new program and I had asked for 10 founding members. I wasn't sure if I'd get 2 or 10, I just wasn't sure what to expect. And it turns out I got 12. I didn't know how to shut the cart down. I was a little confused. So when it was time to, I left it open for a week for anyone who wanted to join and, sent out a few emails along the way, just reminding and encouraging those who were maybe a bit scared to take that leap. They weren't quite sure. And yeah, there at the end, a few more scraped in. I thought that maybe, it was safe to leave it on the Saturday night because it was meant to close on the Saturday night when I was very tired and I couldn't work out actually how to shut it down. But yeah, no, after that, I still got some more. So yeah, great. It's an amazing group of girls. I am so excited to work with them. They are all so motivated to make some really powerful changes and transformations in their lives. And I'm on board. I am so excited to see how we go. So I will keep you posted on how it's going. One of my patients yesterday said to me that it would be very interesting to get one of these girls on maybe along the way and see what she thinks, how it's going and how the whole thing is going on. So we'll see. We'll see if you girls are listening, maybe you might put your hand up along the way and we'll see because there'll be people interested in how we're going. I know a lot of people are fascinated with what we're doing. I'm not sure there's anything really quite like it. I know there's, lots of different variations, but yeah, very much fun. Now, if you think that this might be something that you could be interested in the future, I am keeping a wait list on the Opt to Thrive page. So I will leave a link to it actually in the show notes because it's not actually on the Opt to Thrive page. It's through the software that I'm using for the program. So if you would like to be on the wait list, I will put a link down there. Subscribe to my email list in any event because you're going to get some good information. You'll be kept up to date when the podcast episodes come out and, a few little tidbits along the way. I've got lots of things planned, lots of exciting adventures ahead. So yeah, I would encourage you to subscribe. And can I also, just before we get started today with our very special guest, I'm pretty excited about this one, like I am for all of them, because I get to pick all the topics. It's great. Can I just ask, if you haven't rated the podcast, can you please take a second now just to do a quick little rate and review? And remember to pass it along to anyone who you think could use this information, because I think there's lots of people are finding it helpful, which is just filling my little heart with joy. So let's get started, shall we? This one is for you ladies who have itchy feet and a craving for some adventure. You'd love to get out there and explore the world, but maybe you're just not sure where to start, how to plan it, how to make it happen. Maybe you're scared. Maybe it's something you don't feel like you can do on your own. There are so many of us who have partners who don't want to travel or don't have partners to travel with or friends who are available or want to travel. I know my husband isn't a keen traveler unless it's in Australia. It took him a good, I think 10 years plus to drag him to America to see where I come from. So I can relate. And I know of women who are in their later years who have not actually gone out and done much traveling because their partner never really wanted to. And I really hate the idea of people missing out on something that they would love to do. So this episode is for all you girls who are thinking about it. Or maybe you just want a little holiday in your home today and you want to live vicariously through someone who has had some pretty amazing adventures exploring the world. And that describes perfectly my guest today. I cannot wait to have this discussion with her. I met her just over a year ago when I did part of the Camino Trail in Spain. It just so happened that I had an opportunity come up. My daughter had started working for an airline and was living overseas, and an opportunity came up for us to meet in Paris. We'd been wanting to do this Paris trip for most of her life, and we just never got around to it. So it came up, and I thought, it's probably a good opportunity for me to do some of the Camino Trail, which is something I had been wanting to do for a while. I had been studying Spanish for a good couple of years before that because I knew that at some stage I was going to get there, right? I had first heard about the Camino Trail at a dinner for my son's graduation at his school. And we were sat at a table with a couple of his friends' parents, and Linda Speedy. I'm going to give her a little shout out today because it was her discussion with her girlfriend that night at the table that really put that thought in my mind and set that in motion, which really ended up being a catalyst for what I'm doing today. So it's so exciting because on that trip, I had finally gotten myself to a place, with this hormonal transition stuff, my body and what it was doing. I'd finally gotten myself into a place where I was feeling like I was coming out the other side. I was feeling pretty good. I was getting a handle on it. And so I had gone on this trip, walked for a little over a week by myself on the trail. And it was during that time that Opt to Thrive was born. And my guest today, Deanna, who we're going to introduce in a second, it was actually looking at her reels and things that really got that kind of creative inspiration firing up within me about creating more online. And I was starting to realize that there was all of this information that other women weren't getting, that I had learned, that I had gone out and got on my own. There's this revolution of education and information coming out around menopause in the last few years. So it all kind of came together on that trip. So today I want to take you for a little holiday. Wherever you're at, I want you to live vicariously through some of Deanna's adventures and travels. We're going to learn some tips and tricks about how to travel on your own as a solo woman in midlife. That can be a terrifying prospect for some of us. And so we're going to hear from her things that she's learned along the way that might save us some trouble and maybe help us plan some of those trips that we would like to take maybe in the future. So without further ado, please let me introduce to you my guest, Deanna Justison. We met at a restaurant. It was the end of the season on the Camino Trail. Or no, sorry, beginning of the season. So it was off season and there weren't many people there. Lots of things were shut down. There was pretty much no one but us in this little kind of, what do they call them, an albergue?
Albergue.
And yeah. And It's funny. You wouldn't know this about me, but I don't normally talk to a lot of people when I'm out and about. I'm usually keeping to myself. But what I learned about myself on that trip was towards the end of that, I was actually wanting to talk to people. So I remember your face when I was like, I started 100 questions, I think. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Like, and I think I probably overwhelmed you a bit, but I think I learned that I do need to, reach out and connect with people after a certain while. I do like my own company. I'm a bit of an introvert. But yeah, so we struck up a conversation and it was just a fascinating conversation. And from then on, you had mentioned that you're on Instagram, which I had never really been much of a social media person. So I went back to my room and looked you up and because you had, all these great stories. And from there, actually, I don't know if you know this. I think I may have mentioned it to you after I told you that I had started the podcast, but your reels inspired me that, oh, wow, I could really do something creative here. And because this whole Opt to Thrive thing was it hadn't even been born yet. And I was just kind of stewing in this creativity. And then I saw what you were doing and I thought, ooh, I could, it just all fit in. Right. So it was part of my inspiration. So thank you. Now, Deanna, tell us where you're from and let's start there.
Okay, well, I'm a Canadian. I'm born and raised in Vancouver. And this is kind of where my journey begins. I kind of always call it home, but I'm in my 50s now and I have lived in a number of different places on a number of different continents over the years. But Canada, I'm totally Canadian. You can tell by my accent.
Yep.
So yeah, Pacific Northwest is where I live, and Canada, the U.S. I've lived in Spain, Argentina, France, all over Asia, in Hong Kong, Taiwan, that kind of thing. So I've been all around, living all around, and so traveling for me has always been something exciting that started out as a passion as a child because my grandmother used to travel and come back and bring us goodies from traveling to African countries or European countries. And then eventually for business, I started traveling and then beyond. So, yeah.
Okay. And so how have you always kind of traveled solo or is that something that's you've come to kind of in this period of time?
Well, I've been married a couple times. I think that if I do the tally on that, for about 26 years in total to two different people. So there have been times where I have traveled with other people, with a spouse, and definitely I started organizing group travel as a young person. I got into banking right out of high school for a decade into banking and investing and that sort of thing. And I just was dying to get out and get traveling. And so I used to tell my friends, oh, found this place where we can go. I mean, this is way back before the internet and that you could book anything on your own, seriously. And I'd be like, oh, I found this place where we can go and we can rent a penthouse. This is before Airbnb and vacation rental by owner or booking.com. And I'd be like, so if you give me $100 now, I get like, six other people plus me and my husband. If you give me $100 now and $100 on this date, and then you save up $50 each month until this time, we can all go on an incredible vacation. And then we would end up basically going to rent a house and hanging out and exploring and bringing our rollerblades, whether it was San Diego or somewhere in Mexico or something like that. So I've always been extremely passionate about traveling and exploring and eating different food and that kind of thing. So it's been kind of a mixture of friends that were complicit in the desire to explore, and also then sometimes traveling with a spouse that also was equally as intrigued with travel. And like I said, again, sometimes it was business related, kind of got into the .com era where that took us all over the place, and sometimes in private jets and private yachts and things like that. But otherwise, now I'm back on my own again, and I do spend a lot more time traveling on my own. Absolutely. But even while I was married, a lot of the time I was traveling on my own because both of my marriages were a bit of a divide and conquer kind of situation.
So you were actually traveling back when it wasn't so easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of things that make it a lot easier. And we're going to talk about those today because I think those are the things that really help. If you know that those are available, it doesn't seem like such an insurmountable obstacle. I've been, as I said, following you on your Instagram, and I love this quote that you had not too long ago. I can see that you've been traveling most of this year. And this quote, you said, "Choose travel. Don't wait for things to get easier, simpler, better. Life will always be complicated. Learn ways to travel within your means right now. Otherwise, you'll run out of time. We can't choose our circumstances, but we can still find simple ways to create adventure in our everyday lives." I loved that.
I didn't make it up, but I will definitely take credit for reposting that.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, it actually really touched me because that really hits home. So yeah, you are loving your traveling. And as I said, you have been, from what I could see, you back on the Camino again this year. It seems that you've done a bit of the Caminos. Are you like knocking them all out? Because there's like, what, about 6 of them or something?
There seems to be an endless supply. There are so many. There are so many different routes or routes, however you want to pronounce it. There's many different ways to get there, and of course, the one that you and I met on, where you were doing the last 100 kilometers, was the Camino Frances, which is super popular. I used to live in Spain many, many years ago when it was like one of those sort of big years for pilgrims from all over the world to come and do it. And I remember it was such a big deal back that year, and I was desperate to go and do it because I was always hiking in the Cristalina trails and things like that down on the Costa del Sol. So, to answer your question, my travels and my trekking growing up in the Pacific Northwest, particularly Vancouver or anywhere around the Cascade Mountains in Washington State, we have endless hiking and trekking and backcountry, and we have wild animals here. I mean, we have elk and bear and all that kind of stuff. So the opportunity to spend time living in Spain and then be exposed to all the trails and the hiking and the walking, the through hiking, basically, that it's called, where you can go from town to town, much like the Pacific Coast Trail that goes from Canada all the way to Mexico. There's plenty of books and stories about that. That kind of through hiking where you wake up every day and you go walking, to be able to do it in a region where there's no threat of wild animals ravaging you in the middle of the night. And then also as a single woman, the threat of sort of being followed or slightly harassed or, pursued is very limited in that regard. So the idea of doing the Camino is just a really, really pleasant way of traveling, exploring a region, tasting wonderful food, getting to know people. Everything slows right down. Actually, that's some of the things that my friends also that solo travel, they say just in general, solo traveling slows things down so that you can choose what you enjoy, because when you're traveling with other people, some people want to sleep in, other people want to hurry up and get ready to go do something. And when you solo travel, you just have the opportunity to soak so much more in. And I think where you and I met on the Camino, that's an experience that a lot of people desire, doing a Camino or trekking. I went to Rome, and there's another one that's, goes through Tuscany that's possible. And there's just so much trekking that really, really works for solo travelers.
And I think one of the draws for me as well with that Camino, and I would imagine at Midlife especially, because I have done some long distance hikes where you are sleeping in a tent and, on the ground, doing it a little bit rough. Everything's on your back. One of the brilliant things about the Camino is that you have lots of options, but you can sleep in a bed every night in a warm bed, which is nice. Yeah. I did choose to carry, and I think you did too. You carried everything with you, but you can have people take your bags ahead. And so it does make it easier. So yeah, I can see the appeal. And you had some beautiful wildflower photos. It looked like you were really being blessed with all of the beautiful landscaping.
The springtime.
Yeah. So have you done the Camino at different times of the year?
Yes, I have. I've done it at different times and different stages, and I primarily love to do it when it's not busy because I don't really want to get stuck behind people that are kind of off gassing. And it's great that they're bubbly and they're talking a lot and that kind of thing, but I will choose a time of year to walk and just really take in nature. And also, sometimes, like what I did this year, is I walked the opposite way.
Oh.
I don't know if you caught that, but there is sort of, a section between the first number of stages where people start in France in Saint-Jean-Pierre-de-Port, and they then kind of work their way to Pamplona. I did the reverse. It can be quite grueling, and people are starting and they're assembling in the Pyrenees, and they're so excited about the whole thing that they're like, and it's kind of nice to go the opposite way so that you're not stuck behind a bunch of people that are really excited. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you have options, as a solo traveler. I think as the more I enjoy travel by myself, the less reliant I am on too much company. But I think, it's a good thing when you're starting out, if there's support, even like what we were talking about, somebody packing your packs for you and that kind of thing, those kind of holidays, whether you're going to like an all inclusive resort and that's your first solo traveling adventure where you have safety and things are provided for you, I think it's wonderful. I really started kind of doing that as a young person in my 20s, where I was like, screw it, I'm going to Hawaii because I know that I can go to Hawaii and it's fairly safe. I know that my surroundings, I know what to expect. And when you're starting out solo traveling, it's prudent to be able to have things lined up where you've got safe accommodations, you've got food. And then when you start to get more adventurous, well, maybe you start to add learning a language and being able to communicate, and maybe you start taking public transit, those kinds of things. And certainly now, of course, with our devices, if you're really good at using those, there's so much you can do, from booking tickets and paying things online and using translation software and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter if you start by solo traveling, going somewhere where almost all the decisions are made for you, like a cruise, for instance. That's a great place to start. And then little by little, you start to adventure more. And I have friends that are at every single stage of the journey of solo travel. It's really inspiring. It's really inspiring.
Can you take us through those stages, like what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, stages would be, maybe somebody is starting out either as a young person where they decide on a gap year, to go backpacking. I didn't have that opportunity myself. I got right into the workforce as a young person and started making money and started traveling for business, which is kind of another way where you start seeing the world through traveling, but you're kind of supported through business. But then what do you do with your little weekends off or your time off? There's plenty of people that add kind of a day on either side of their business travel where they start to explore and be adventurous. I've got a couple of girlfriends that live in Texas that they do that. And I have a couple of friends that started traveling when they were 2 years maybe out of high school and going traveling where they just were like, that's it. I need to go find out who I am and go travel for like a year. And might I add, if you're under 35, definitely the Commonwealth countries have this, but other countries have it where you can do work travel visas, which, again, I got right into the workforce. My path was different, but if I had the opportunity and my life was different, if I had the opportunity to do it all again and I knew about that, I absolutely would have done that. So, anybody that might be listening or that has kids that are under the age of 35, the idea of travel, like a vacation and a working visa, to any other country to go learn more about culture and travel and adapt, they can fund their travel by working. But by the time I kind of got to that point, I was already enjoying the next stage where a little bit more luxurious travel, enjoying the great dinners and like that's part of it. That's part of travel is, the culture of going to shows or staying at fine hotels and maybe adding a spa trip to it. Also, there's the other aspect of what I have been doing more recently where, okay, I take a look and see what kind of a deal there is with a repositioning cruise. And I know that a certain cruise line that suits my demographic. It's not going to be too many family and it's not going to be too many elderly people on there. It's going to be kind of like people like me that want to explore and maybe they're fit. All of a sudden I take a look and I'm like, wow, if I can find a cruise that costs me about $100 a day, and that covers my food, beverage, my accommodation, my tipping, that kind of thing. That's a pretty good bargain to get me to my next continent. So that's kind of that next stage where there's a bit of the question marks or a bit of the planning has already been done for me. So now I just get to take that free time and do some exploring. You also meet other people. I have a small roster of friends that I have collected over time that have either been the backpacker the backpacker group that I've been talking about where they were on a gap year or in the middle of changing their careers and they decided that they were going to go live in a foreign country for a while and open up their own hostel. And I've met them kind of like that group of people. And I also have another group of friends that decided they're approaching retirement age. Maybe they're single women or had been single mothers, finished raising their kids, and they're like, I want to travel, but how do I go about jumping into this? And they'll get into doing a cruise or some kind of tour group or something. And then they reach out and they're just like really fun people that you have so much in common with. And at some point in time, they're like, okay, this is enough of having this whole thing planned for me. Now I'm ready to go rogue. And that kind of takes us to the next level where the level where I'm at, where I rely on where do I feel like going? I usually go south, down to Argentina has been a home for me since 2007. So whether it's Australia, New Zealand, or down to Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, that kind of thing for November through February, and then head up north for the summertime to enjoy the Pacific Northwest or somewhere in Europe or something like that. I kind of just take a look on, I've got tools. I look on Google Flights, like what flight look good and where would be a really good economical place for me to end up and what do I want to explore. I like to shop the bargains a bit, and that's where I end up finding my next adventure. I'm wide open to a wider range of activities. I will do anything. I'm now in my mid 50s, so nothing too crazy strenuous, but I love trekking and bicycle riding. I can ride a motorcycle. I will go diving. I will go skydiving, all of these kinds of things. So I just take a look and see what kind of adventure would I like to go on and find a great price. And next thing you know, I am planning something kind of like the next month. And I just kind of keep moving on, whether it's jumping on a double decker bus that has accommodation for you to sleep on. Argentina, I learned about that 20 years ago when I arrived, where they were like, well, you can fly. Surely you can fly. But what we have here is these buses that are basically like a business class seat, what you're used to in a plane, but it's on a bus and they serve you meals and you get on at night in Buenos Aires and you wake up in the morning in Patagonia. And
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing.
there's no shortage of all of these really cool things. You get to see things all the way along if you're not super rushed. There's a thing about, do you have more time than money? Well, you get to see a lot more things. If you have more money than time, then of course you kind of tighten up your itinerary. For solo travel, I kind of even turn what's all around me, that things that people take for granted, into an adventure. And something as simple as I've got friends that need me to watch their cat for a month in, say, Walnut Creek, which is just outside of the Bay Area in San Francisco. I'll go watch their cat and take care of the house for a month. And then when it's time for me to move on, I'll just take a look at the Amtrak and do a sleeper train for like 2 days to somewhere and end up somewhere else. So these kinds of little solo travel adventures are all around us. You do not have to get, 2 weeks off work. You don't have to get 2 weeks away from your partner or try and get your friends to come with you. You could literally do these little solo traveler adventures. There's other people coming from around the world to come and experience them, and they're all around us. So
That is
we just
awesome.
have to be resourceful and look into it and Google it.
Okay, now I want to know, you mentioned a cruise line that's kind of, it sounds like a bit active people, kind of midlife. Tell us what it is.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's different cruise lines for different people. What I have found being in Vancouver or growing up in Vancouver, we have a big cruise port here, Vancouver, Victoria, our capital city, and also Seattle, so in the United States, but not far away from where I grew up. We all have cruise ships that go up and down our coastline and then go tour the fjords and that sort of thing in Alaska. And that was where I kind of started doing some cruising or resumed doing cruises. I had done a couple repositioning cruises and done a Mexico cruise, but not to the extent that I've been doing now. Now I have actually been using Princess Cruises because it suits I think my tolerance for the number of people and what kind of shenanigans goes on. um, it suits my demographic. But I'll take a look at what they have going on, and because I had established home as Bariloche in Argentina, down in the south, and then Vancouver is always a home spot. I had a home in Baton Rouge for about 12 years, so that's very close to New Orleans. I also lived in Fort Lauderdale for a while. So there's all of these sort of points where these cruise ships, they all use them as bases. So at some point in time, I kind of was like, if I could use a cruise ship instead of an airplane to get from one continent to another, because I have the time, I think I'd like to do that. And I have met other people that still have their full-time jobs. Maybe they have a little bit more time off, but I have met people that also do the same thing where they will take a look and maybe about 6 months in advance and they'll think, oh, I'd like to be down in South America during December, January when it's cold up north where they're from. And we'll end up kind of saying, hey, are you planning to go to South America? Yes. Oh my goodness, we're on the same ship. And you'll spend 2 weeks to 3 weeks basically crossing the equator and heading south, or you can leave Vancouver and have done Vancouver over to Hawaii, and that ship actually will then continue on down to all along different Asian countries. It'll stop in like Vietnam, Singapore, on its way down to Australia, New Zealand, that sort of thing. So the cruise ships have kind of been a recent addition for me since COVID. And it just works. I have found a cruise ship line that they have lots of activities and shows going on, and I don't need to participate in any of it. I love that people do want to go to that. Depending on which level of ship I'm on of this company, sometimes they will have silent discos and that's perfect for me. Or if they have a great live band that plays jazz, I can enjoy that. Or I can enjoy spending an entire day just luxuriating in my room and looking at the ocean go by. But also the port days are wonderful. You don't have to go and book one of their expensive tours. It's fine if you do as well. But there's a couple other tools that I use when I'm traveling that whether I'm cruising or on my own. Get Your Guide is a great resource. Viator also does tours that are really great. These are all kind of cool experiences. Airbnb, I used Airbnb for quite some time. I'm using Airbnb, I would say less. I've kind of put the brakes on that just for whatever personal reasons. but they've also had adventures or experiences. So that kind of stuff exists online where, as you're coming into a certain area, if you're good at doing research, the millennial age group will rely upon Reddit. Back in the day, you used to read Yelp reviews or Google reviews, that kind of thing. You kind of do a little bit of research and find out what's in the area. And a lot of the time through Viator or Get Your Guide, you will be able to buy tickets for even events that are going on, even say if you show up in London and you want to buy tickets to a show on the Strand that's been running for years, all of a sudden you can buy last minute tickets. There's so much just sitting there in your hand that whether you show up on a cruise ship or you've rented a place to stay or staying at a hotel for a couple of days, sure, the concierge can help you with that, but those days of traveling are kind of in the past. You don't need a travel agent to book your ticket anymore. You don't need a concierge to make the recommendations. You can do a bit of research and learning to talk to people like the way you and I connected and got visiting and were just vulnerable and shared information. We learned a lot about one another and about, the options that were around us in a very short period of time. So that's what solo traveling can do.
Absolutely. So you did give us a couple, which is this is awesome. So the Viator and Get Your Guide. We talked about how you have kind of been there when it was harder to do. It's so much easier to do now. So you also mentioned Google Flights as a go-to. I would love to hear maybe your top kind of 5 of go-to sites when you're planning and organizing. Do you have any hot tips? I know that when I travel, I do use booking.com a lot. I love reading the reviews. The people will get on there and say, this place was close to the trail, this place wasn't, this didn't have this. And I found that so helpful. And I also, when I did the Camino, I just booked from day to day, which I could because it was off season. I don't recommend doing that if it's not, because I hear it's like parades of people on the trail. But that was a luxury, which was great. So yeah, let's hear your top sites.
Well, Google Flights is fantastic, of course, because no matter what starting point or destination you're putting in, it's going to cover a lot of sort of North American and European routes. So that's handy. And that can also help you with accommodation. While I was living in Asia, it was called Sea Trip. Now it's just called Trip, but that is an incredible tool. They have an app and a website where you could actually, I used to do this when I was living in Hangzhou in China. I used to sit there and be like, okay, I'll just put in where I am. Like if I wanted to fly out of Shanghai, I'll just put this in and this date and then see what it comes up with. And it literally will tell you, oh, well, in 2 days, if you want to leave from Shanghai for $75, we can fly you to like Cape Town. Like,
Wow.
unbelievable what you can see. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a couple of people that are on Instagram that are doing that kind of thing, like sort of younger, adventurous people where they're like, watch me go fly somewhere over the weekend with $500 and see what I can do. So Trip is one of those things that you could go on a virtual holiday just while you geek out and you plan a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes.
So I use Google Flights and Trip. And when that kind of sorts out what my options are, I'm always flexible on my days of when I'm going to start and then when I'm going to finish so that I can get the best deal. At that point in time, I usually will go then to the airline website of the route that I'm looking at because usually I have a relationship. So, if it's a part of the One World group or an alliance group, there's different groups of airlines that you get rewarded for travel. So I will usually kind of figure out my plan with the big websites and then go direct through booking through an airline. I will also go to a hotel group website and search. So, whether I don't need to mention any particular names, but if somebody's loyal, it's always really, really good to get a loyalty number from anybody that you book with and then to provide that every time you book, because I can't even tell you how many free flights or hotel nights I've used
Mm.
years. And when I was living in Spain, I used to fly family members or a hairdresser or whoever. I just on my points alone, I would be able to fly people over to come and visit me. And I mean, even to this day, sometimes I end up paying for somebody to join me and I'm using some sort of rewards. The other thing that I have used is Airbnb, of course, a lot of the time, but booking.com has been more on my radar definitely since doing the Camino. It seems to work really great in Europe and also the UK more than in North America, but they also start to give rewards. So I've started to reap some of the rewards there, but absolutely the reviews are really helpful because there's not a lot of population of reviews with bots. So it is usually real people that are writing things that you can kind of gauge
Mm.
if it's a place worth going to or if you're going to have difficulty gaining access or that kind of thing. That and Viator and Get Your Guide. Between all of those, it's like your air travel. Also, actually using Google Maps and Apple Maps when I am on the ground somewhere and I need to get somewhere. There's certain regions where Google Maps will work better at planning the use of transit or rideshare, that kind of thing. Or sometimes, Apple Maps will be better. You really need to, while you're there on the ground, I mean, you might be able to find that out with a search and find out what other people are saying. But once you're on the ground, if you have those apps in your phone or whatever the Android, I guess Android would be using a Google Map. But once you've got that in there and you have where you're going to be staying and where you're going to be able to choose transit or a walking route. A lot of the time, one is better than the other, but you can use that as part of your travel planning once you're there and on the ground and figuring it out.
Google Maps, that was such a game changer for me when I met my daughter in Paris. And I've used it like in Melbourne, I've used it everywhere. But just for people who haven't used that, like it literally tells you how many steps to the bus stop, which number of bus at what time. And, the train will then leave from here. Like it really does take so much of the stress and planning out of it. So yeah, I can't recommend that enough.
And if you also have your wallet in your phone. I mean, times are changing. Things are, people get hacked and there's always a security issue. But if you're comfortable already where you are on the ground using whatever it is in the Android or, I use an iPhone and I use Apple products, but I have a Apple wallet that has my credit cards. But also when you're somewhere and you download their transit app, sometimes you need a transit app in order to tap in, but through the European train systems in Spain, there's one, and in France, there's another. But you have that, or you simply just have a debit card or a credit card or both set up on your phone to be able to walk up and just tap your way through a turnstile and just keep rolling. It is amazing. And then, of course, using Uber, Grab, Lyft. I'm trying to think of the one that we use in Asia. It also pops up in Argentina. These different ride sharing apps are good to try and download definitely and then establish in different areas. They come in really handy.
So you said Grab and Lyft. I haven't heard of those before. Are those more European or?
Lyft is North American and it shows up a bunch of other places as well. But Lyft and Uber are very big in North America. Grab, I think, is in more European. Uber in certain areas will also populate with taxis. So over time, in regions where they did not want you using quote unquote mini cab services or something like Uber, over time, taxi companies have started to also enable their drivers to use that as a optional dispatch. So Didi is the one that I'm thinking of. Didi, I think I even maybe used Didi in New Zealand when I was there, but definitely Didi is in mainland China and it's available in Argentina. So you never know where these different apps are going to pop up. Singapore, I think I used Grab. I kind of don't want every single one of them on my phone.
Mm.
Um, but it is handy if you're in a region that it at least accepts one of them to have that and start to get using that. And of course, then take a look at buses because there are many regions where jumping on a bus is, the bus companies have brand new buses. Their drivers are super professional and it's really economical to be able to drag. If for me, I travel with a suitcase that has fine clothes, for going out to dinner, maybe at a Michelin starred restaurant or going on a cruise. I've got something where I can be dressed up, smartly dressed, but then maybe also I'm carrying a backpack and doing some trekking and some sort of athletic holiday. Jumping on a bus is pretty cool because your luggage, whether it's a coach or a train, can drop off the bags, and it's not like getting on a flight where you're like, oh, am I gonna have to pay extra for this or that? And traveling on a bus can sometimes only be like, €50. I went from the north of Spain in San Sebastian up to London, and that was like overnight through Paris. And then my bus boarded a ferry across from Calais to Dover and ended up in London, Victoria in the morning. And that was like €50. Unbelievable.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know in the past, and I have used a fair bit of TripAdvisor. Like if you're looking at restaurants, if you're in a place where there's heaps of restaurants and, pick the top 10 and then pick one from there. Is that something that you use as well?
I don't really use TripAdvisor so much anymore. I
Yeah.
definitely used to. Sometimes I use Open Table to
Okay.
book a table somewhere, but I would still highly recommend it. But I also retired over 20 years ago from the .com industry where marketing online was my specialty. So I've kind of watched over time where different technologies pop up. They build a certain amount of critical mass and have information, and then at some point in time maybe some of the information that gets put in there is bots. So maybe I don't tend to look so much at some of those where I feel like there's a boiler room of people putting opinions, but also that's up to an individual to take a look and determine, is it a deep fake? Is somebody just trying to build a reputation? Or
Mm.
yeah.
Do you have a site that you go to? Like if you're in a new place and you want to check out, maybe what the good restaurants are, that kind of thing. Is there something else that you rely on or just word of mouth?
Yeah, that's it. Word of mouth.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
If you decide to book using Viator or Grab Your Guide and you you just decide, okay, I'm just going to do a little bicycle tour. There's always somebody that is young and vivacious and very connected and very happening. And while you go on your bicycle tour and you see beautiful things and you get the history and you have some photo ops, you'll also find out the really cool places to hang out and also the places that offer the best value. That is a blast.
Well, while
So
we're on the subject of eating out, when you're eating out by yourself, it can be a little bit awkward. Do you have any do you have any tips? How do you manage it?
yeah, I think I used to worry about it. I think I used to worry about it before, but I cannot afford to worry about it now or I would starve. So
Okay.
um I think I just have a certain level of confidence because I know I'm coming there to eat. I went to full disclaimer here. I used to eat in the most incredible restaurants in the world, and then I went to culinary school when I retired, and I basically became a French chef. And then I went and did stages in the back of the restaurants where I used to pay $1,000 for dinner. And I worked in these restaurants where even the people that work there don't get to eat the food. So I kind of have this wild understanding of what's going on in a restaurant. And essentially, when you go as a single diner, initially I used to feel like, oh, they're looking at me or I'm a bother. And you know what? They're just absolutely delighted to have you there as a guest. And especially if you're passionate about the food, they will take such good care of you. If you're in a place where you don't speak the language or you don't speak it well, just make a slight effort. Make a slight effort to be understood, be a little self-deprecating. We're good as Canadians at apologizing for for being idiots or whatever, but that will go a long way, that when you show up somewhere, rather than being demanding or feeling awkward about that, if you're slightly self-deprecating, this is the thing about solo travel, is if you get into a position where you're feeling a little bit anxious, um, go with your gut, but also allow other people to help you. It is the most beautiful thing that happens, and it doesn't matter if it's you, walking up to a restaurant, they're like, you don't have a reservation, and you know, if you can sort of just back down and put yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I totally understand. And but I would really, I've heard everything great about you. And I would really love if there's any way you can squeeze me in tonight. There's somebody that's always going to take pity on you. And then you will become sort of their pet project. And pretty soon the manager will be sending the finest dish that they have, or the head chef that is inventing something will be sending something out to you, and you will be invited into the kitchen. It's amazing how it happens. So just, have the confidence to enjoy yourself. If you're on your phone, I think we're all kind of at the stage where maybe your device should not be on the table or lighting up your face. If you need the company of your device, keep it under the table for doing a bit of research, but just relax, just breathe. And you know what? People watching is a wonderful pastime. Watching everything transpire, trying to find common ground of other people that are in the dining room, watching the orchestra of how the food is coming out and how it's being served. It doesn't matter if it's a diner or if it's a fine restaurant. There's something to be gained from just sitting there, relaxed, breathing, taking it all in, and then really enjoying your food and asking questions, especially if you don't know. Nobody expects you to know what you're eating. If you're eating in one of these restaurants where they talk about this is what you're having, don't be afraid to tell them you don't know what that means and you need a further explanation. The best restaurants, say in San Sebastian, you're there and you're entertained, and they will tell you how they developed something. They're so proud of it. So that's the kind of thing where, dining alone, it's not just eating. There's a lot of entertainment that can go on.
I think that could take a lot of the stress out of it for people. Just be present, enjoy the meal, like something, especially if you're in a foreign country. Like, when are you going to have that again? Amazing
Yeah.
experience. Now, you did
Yeah.
touch on it a little bit along the way, safety. So I was with my daughter, a bit of a funny story recently. We met up because she works for an airline overseas, and she flies back to Australia occasionally. And we kind of have these quick catch ups. And it was a beautiful day in Melbourne, and we decided that we'd go across the street to the park and sit on a towel. So we took a towel from the hotel, stuck it in the bag, and and I'm one of these really nervous kind of people. And we've got the hotel towel. We're not supposed to do that. Anyway, we're crossing the crosswalk, and then all of a sudden her phone goes off that someone has got an air tag near her or something, or maybe it was mine. Anyway, it made me think, oh my gosh, the hotel's put an air tag on the towel. And they know that we've taken the towel out. I've never even seen an air tag until that day. And then my daughter was like, Mom, really, seriously, they're not going to put an air tag on every towel in the hotel. But yeah, so she told me that she and her girlfriends will often trade air tags so that they can kind of keep track of each other when they go out. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. And I know a lot of people are using air tags in their luggage and that kind of thing. In terms of safety, is that something you use? Do you have any tips or tricks around safety?
Yeah, I mean, as far as my luggage, I always keep my valuables and my documents with me, and I'm religious about where those are maintained so that I never have to freak out or doubt where they are. As far as my personal safety and where I am and how I check in, because my parents are deceased, there's nobody ahead of me that's checking in on me, and I don't have children of my own where I'm keeping them posted. So it's kind of my safety network outside of my traveling is my group of friends. And I have a group of friends ranging from their kind of like late 30s to their 80s. So what I end up using is definitely I'm constantly in touch with friends and, my adopted family with WhatsApp. I share my location. A lot of us are using iPhone and we can just turn on location sharing. So that's enabled. And my devices as well. My devices, whether I'm traveling with my iPad or my AirPods, that's kind of like having an AirTag where I know where things are at. I think when you and I were on the Camino, I had started off one day where I
Yes.
left my AirPods. I left my AirPods because it was a hamlet. There was like 7 homes, and I was already gone for a kilometer when all of a sudden it was like, "Bloop, you've left your AirPods." So I had to double back and go get them. But I had the rest of my luggage with me, so it wasn't a big deal. So keeping track of your things, definitely air tags. And I love that idea of what your daughter does with trading with friends. My group is a little bit older, and also that also means I'm not pursued as much as when I was younger. I still definitely get propositioned and hit on even in countries where I don't feel threatened by that sort of thing, but also with my age it doesn't happen as much as it used to. So that's really nice. But yeah, I mean, also posting on social media has been something
Mm.
definitely over the last 10 years that allows friends or family to keep up with me and to know where I am. And there's basically like a handful of people, probably 5 people that I speak to every single day, and they have gotten to know my traveling. And also if I'm going to be off grid, I own property as well, where I've got like 9 acres and I have kind of a cottage that I'm building and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I'm also can be off grid for some period of time. And so you kind of get used to being able to report back using electronic devices to put you on a map. Also, you can enable things with Google Maps and Apple Maps to keep track of that kind of stuff. But that's basically it. And also, like probably any woman these days, they know how their phone works, that they've got it programmed that if you hit that jog button 5 times, it will automatically start calling emergency services. You already automatically set up your emergency contacts. For me, I sometimes I change it. It's kind of between maybe 3 other friends that I have that if somebody grabbed my phone and they were like, this lady's having an emergency, or heaven forbid, I fall down and I don't get up, my watch starts calling everybody.
Yep.
So these devices can kind of help us keep us safe and alert the authorities or our friends.
Okay, so you did mention something there, and this is going to show that I do live in rural South Australia where, it is extraordinarily safe. And
Yeah.
I have no idea what button I'm supposed to hit 5 times. What was that you just said?
Oh, well, on my iPhone, I basically have the jog button on the right-hand side, depending which version of the phone that you have, but kind of if you have the latest one that's out, when you're holding
Uh-huh.
the phone, what's facing you on the right-hand side, there, you've got your volume buttons on the left, and then there's a single button for like locking your screen or whatever you have it programmed for. You can have that one programmed that if you hit it 5 times, it starts calling
Uh-huh.
emergency services. It does a countdown. It will give you a few seconds to be able to cancel that. There was one time I was on a road trip by myself, and in the US, I'm sorry to say it if anybody's listening from the US, but that's generally where, even having lived there and been a permanent resident, green card holder for many years and living in many different places from Fort Lauderdale, Baton Rouge, in a number of places in Washington state, that's usually where I'm more concerned about my safety and high alert. And there was a time where I was in New Mexico refueling my car, and I actually ended up catching my toe on something, tripped and fell. smashed my head, and there I was, sort of slightly gaining my faculties, but my watch said, "Deanna, you have fallen. In 10 seconds, we are going to call the authorities." And I'm looking at my watch. I still can't move because I was completely stunned and smashed my head. But I'm looking up at this other car that was just loaded with people that were, let's say, they were not the most trustworthy of individuals to be looking at. It was extremely dodgy, but at that point in time, I at least knew that I had that as a backup. I did stop it from calling the authorities, but my watch knew that I was in danger and was ready to also, call my husband at the time, who wasn't with me, but was ready to call him, was ready to call the authorities. It's pretty incredible to be able to enable those things. You might need to do a little bit of research about your own specific device and what security it offers. But those are just things that, because I spend so much time on my own, even while I've been married and had a very extremely protective husband, when I wasn't with him, there were just things that I needed to make sure that I was protected, living in Louisiana or Florida. I don't know. There's just things
Mm,
can go a little crazy sometimes. So
absolutely. Gosh, what a
yeah.
story. You have mentioned along the way during our discussion some of the benefits of solo travel. And I love it, just reminded me of another quote that I stole off of your Instagram. You said, "Sometimes I have to remind myself that I am resilient and can do hard things, except when people chew. I can't do that." But
Yeah.
that sums up midlife, really, where we're at with, listening to people
Yeah.
chew. But
Yeah.
can we talk about some of the other things? Are there areas that you feel like you've really grown in doing solo travel? Like, I would imagine that has to stretch you. And yeah, can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah. I think learning other languages, midlife is definitely, it's a hard thing, but it's a worthy thing. And it's something where if you're diligent, just a little bit every day makes a difference. I never imagined that I would ever live in, mainland China and have a landlord who, of course, did not speak English and I did not speak Mandarin, but to be able to bridge the gap. Usually it's food that connects people. Just that's a huge tip. As far as traveling goes or living abroad, is when people connect over food, or if you find out somebody's secret family recipe. Oh my
Mm.
goodness, that really makes you grow. If you love food, or you're willing to learn about somebody's sort of family favorite activities, that really helps you that really helps you grow and connects you with people. Honestly, just being open and willing, living in the moment, like you said before, being present. If you kind of drop your guard a bit about what you expect and realize the world's a big place, like where you grew up and the things that you have come to expect about, how your banking system works and how customer service works and how the utilities work, it's not that way everywhere. So that's part of growing and learning hard things, is maybe not expecting so much and just being open to absorbing it. Like I was in Spain when that humongous power outage happened.
Mm.
And I happened to be in a town where there was about maybe maximum 50 houses. I never watched the news. I never watched network television, but I was in this beautiful house for the night. And I was like, I'm here early. You know what? I'm going to turn on the television. I turned on the television because I was going to start watching some Spanish television. And within about 7 minutes, all of a sudden, the power went off and the TV went off. And I was like, okay, well, fine. I wasn't really that invested. But my phone, of course, had power because it was charged. And I then sent a message to the lady that owned this beautiful rural home. And it was, about half an hour later, I was like, by the way, not a big deal, but the power's out at the house. I assumed that I had seen some construction workers reforming a house. And I totally figured, oh, somebody hit like a power line, it'll come back on. And she ended up texting me back and she said, actually, the entire country is out.
Wow.
She said, we've only got notification that all of Spain is out. Portugal is out and part of France is out. And then that was the last thing that I heard from her. And so power was out mostly in Spain for a solid 12 hours. Where I was, it came back on after 7 hours. But I have to tell you, it didn't even cause a blip where I was because I was in this beautiful area that was surrounded by farm fields and everybody was just people are not addicted to technology there, so it didn't really make that much of a difference. But the way Spain dealt with it was as an entire country. When the power didn't come back on, everybody left work. It was in the morning that it happened. They walked out of work and they went to the streets, and every single cafe and bar that they basically had cold drinks that were cold, not being kept cold, but they needed to be sold. So they started selling all of their beverages, and people were out in the street. Musicians came out into the street, started playing music. People were dancing, people were hosing each other down. And it turned into just a day off without any kind of suffering. And it was the most incredible thing. So the ability to adapt to something like that, if I was more sort of, if I had to work, I might have been pissed off like that. Oh, I don't have a connection or I don't have data or something like that. But really, that's part of what you can learn is to adapt the country that you're in or the culture that you're surrounded by. Follow their lead because there's something to be gained from that. So I'm so delighted that I was there when that happened. It was amazing.
What a great experience.
Yeah.
Really great just to see how other people handle. Like you said, there's nothing like going out and, I am American. I was born in America. I grew up there, came to Australia at about 30 years old. And I had never really wanted to leave America. Like I just never, but then I did. And then I haven't been back. I've actually migrated to Australia, but just this whole world out there, like it just opens up your mind. And like you said, you just become so more appreciative of some of the things that we've got, that you go other places and they have nothing like that. We're just so spoiled, really. We've just got so much, and it really helps you appreciate that. And every single time I come back home, I'm just so grateful for where I live, and I love where I live, and I'm grateful for that. So if for nothing else, it's really good for that.
Totally. It's absolutely a wonderful exercise in going and living somewhere with a little bit less and seeing, honestly, the happiest people usually have the least. It's incredible. There's lessons to be learned there.
Well, that brings me to another one of your quotes, and I'll stop with your quotes. You're probably getting tired of hearing them, but I love them. So I love the backpack effect. So the more you travel, the lighter you pack, not just in your baggage, but in your life. You realize you don't need much to be happy, not the fancy clothes, not the latest gadgets, not the approval of others, just freedom, a sense of purpose, and a heart open to adventure. In the end, it's not about how much you carry, but about how free you are to move. I just loved that. So, Deanna, where are you off to next? What's your next adventure?
Well, I'm actually in Canada just doing a little bit of something that I've needed to do for quite some time. As I mentioned, like my parents both passed away in 2018 and I took care of them for a long time. And then when they were gone, I needed some time. I definitely needed some time to cope with that. But I was traveling and living abroad that whole time that I was also taking care of them. It was a heavy load, but I've kind of come back around and I have some final things that I need to deal with here. And so I'm working on that right now and I'm just giving myself enough time and space to get that done. But I feel like for sure December, January, I'll be back in South America. I've got a friend that has started to travel and she has some dates where she's planning to be down there. So that's usually where you'll find me. I'm also taking a look out at having anything booked. I'm also taking a look at where Princess is going to be in September, October. I might have to fly down to like Australia
Oh,
and
yay.
I know, and catch one of those ships that then comes up all through different Asian ports and then ends up, in Vancouver. So I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to end up next, but I do have 3 complete sets of backpacks with absolutely everything I need on 3 different continents, ready to go at any time. So I really just love to travel light. I travel with a Rimowa suitcase that has kind of my creature comforts, my bit of traveling clothes, and my whatever, my toiletries and stuff like that. But then that's it. I kind of keep it as simple as possible. And where my backpacks are, that's usually where you're going to find me.
Oh, it sounds amazing. So are you happy for me to give out your Instagram address if people want to follow you?
Oh, sure. It's my chef one. It's kind of sporadic posting right now these days, but absolutely go ahead and give it out.
Okay, so if you want to follow Deanna too and follow along with these brilliant adventures, you can find her on Instagram at deanna.cooks.eats.drinks. Lots of great food, lots of great scenery, lots of great Spanish wildflowers. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming along today, Deanna. I've just loved our conversation. I think that it's going to be very inspirational for lots of women who might be just sitting there, wishing they could get out and do this kind of thing, but maybe didn't have the confidence. I think you've given a lot of really great tips on how they can get started and maybe some ideas and suggestions and certainly a lot of inspiration. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I love listening to your podcast. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you're going to have to come to the sunroom when you come to Australia.
Oh, I'd be delighted.
That would be awesome.
Okay, I'll put it on the list.
All right.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.